Oh, wow. Book is PDF from the Library of Congress archives. It's actually a German uh, written account, a manuscript written in 1750. Well, it was a travel they did to Americas in 1750. They returned to Germany in 1754 and wrote it after there. And this was translated, right? And it basically is right here. The name of it's Gottlieb Mittelberger's Journey to Pennsylvania in the year 1750 and returned to Germany in the year 1754, containing not only a description of the country according to its present condition, but also a detailed account of the sad and unfortunate circumstances of most of the Germans that have emigrated or are emigrating to that country. Because remember, why? Why would it be so sad and unfortunate? Remember, most of these are probably convicts or indentured servants. We just got the video, right? White servitude, white slavery. Right, so it was translated from the German by Karl Theo Eben, right, member of the German Society of Pennsylvania. Right, this is from 1898, and we're all the way in page 107 of this book from 1898. It says, according to their color, the inhabitants of Pennsylvania may be divided into four classes. All right, so they're dividing the people who are living in Pennsylvania at that time. This doesn't just mean only Indians. I mean everybody who came in, even Europeans and stuff. So they're saying, so one class would be whites, right? It says, example, Europeans who have immigrated and natives begotten by European fathers and mothers. It says Negroes, example, blacks brought over as slaves from Africa. So we're gonna dodge the hijack right there, right? We know better. And so it says three. Then there's the mulattoes or the mulatters or the mulattoes, right? We know to dodge the hijack right there too. We know a lot of the times they were just naming Indians mulattoes in the census records, right? With no ancestry of Africa or any mixture. Such as are begotten by a white father and a black mother, or by a black father and a white mother, it says. So these are neither white nor black, but yellowish. All right, so what happened to the yellow man? So who's the yellow man? All right, but the fourth complexion or race, or as they say, inhabitants, the color of the inhabitants would be what? Dark brown. Who's dark brown? You already know, right? Who's dark brown? These are the savages or Indians. You know, dodge the hijack with savages, right? They're always going to throw in that word there, try to describe us as savages. All right, so dark brown and Indians, they're the ones that are dark brown, the old inhabitants of the country. These are the original people, the old, the very old, the original inhabitants of this country are what? Dark brown. And they are what? The Indians in Pennsylvania. All right, in 1750, dark brown, Indians, dark brown, Indians. Do you guys see that? Dark brown, Indians.
There are many blacks who go around basically swearing up and down they have an Indian grandmother from the Blackfeet tribe with high cheekbones and long straight black hair down to her knees or something to that effect. Imagine my surprise when I discovered Native Americans in my family, and the connection was less than amicable, with the people being oppressed, not necessarily the Indians. Oklahoma prior to 1907 was not a part of the United States. But when the so-called five civilized tribes fought with the Confederacy during the Civil War, and Oklahoma is still considered Little Dixie, it is amazing. The story of my ancestors is usually left out of the conversation. The five slaveholding tribes known as Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek or Muskogee, and Seminole have received much attention when it comes to their plight of being forced from their eastern homes and resettled in Indian territory. What is almost always left out of this sad tale is the fact that thousands of African and African native people in chattel slavery cried along the same trail under the whip and in chains. My family story is a part of the trail of blood and tears, and hopefully one day it too will become told as part of being black in America. still didn't know much more about my mother's family, and my father could only give me sketchy information. My mother passed in 1980, and what I knew about her family was Uncle JB, who lived in San Francisco, and whenever he visited, it was always a good time. I knew about Aunt June and her husband, Uncle Buddy, who, for a guy who was probably less than 120 pounds, could rip an LA phone book in half. And don't ask me how, but the guy was good. Aunt Margaret, she lived in Waco, Texas. I know about my Aunt Marilyn, who lived in Kansas City, Missouri, and then their brother James, who lived in Maryland. So you can see that everybody was all over the place. We never had a family reunion, so getting to know them was a little difficult. My father's house was broken into, and the place was left disheveled and in a wreck. While my father was putting things back into order, he came across a letter from an attorney doing a search for all of the heirs to some land that was owned by an Ism and Julia Jackson in Oklahoma. In the letter, the attorney performed a genealogical search and discovered one of the daughters of Ism and Julia was a child by the name of Ella. Ella, it turns, was the wife of Matt Freeman, and they were the parents of my grandfather, Joe Freeman. Doing my research of Betty and the Liggins, I would always gather any information on the Freemans and any Joe Freeman I came in contact with, in hopes that one day I would be able to connect the dots. When after a few years of getting nowhere with the records in California, we decided we would visit, or as he called it, go scouting for some information on a trip to Oklahoma and see what we could find on Betty, Hadley, Mitchell, Gladys, and now I knew about Clarence, Mabel, and Nathaniel. I was talking with my father about once a week over the phone and basically conducting interviews to gather whatever memories he had of his childhood. Like most black folks in the South, my father talked about Jim Crow, sharecropping, and having no formal education. He didn't grow up with his father after about the age of 5, and when his father died, he told me about a story when he and his older brother Clayton went to the county clerk's office to inquire about some land they knew their father owned, only to be told by the clerk, "Boy, you better get on away from Brown here. Don't nothing here belong to you." This obviously left them both with a bit of hatred for the South, and it developed a sense in them both that Oklahoma was not a place they wanted to live or raise a family. We have a wealth of information to tell us about our ancestors, and I have to consider myself as one of the lucky ones. It is because of the very nature of their relationship to the Choctaw and Chickasaw tribes that both my maternal grandfather and paternal grandparents left a record that allows me to know them to some degree. Of all of my great grandparents, clearly, Betty Liggins' story is the most compelling. She was the daughter of a Chickasaw man named Robert Howard Love and an enslaved woman named Margaret Ann Wilson. Betty was a lead litigant in a lawsuit by approximately 1,500 to 2,000 individuals who demanded to be enrolled as citizens of the Choctaw and Chickasaw nations as quote-unquote citizens by blood. Betty and the thousands of men, women, and children took their case all the way to the United States Supreme Court. But unfortunately, the case was never argued before the justices because an attorney failed to file a brief for the case to be heard in 1911. By 1912, Betty was deceased, and there has never been a recognition by the Choctaw or Chickasaw tribes that the men and women of Equity Case 7071 were entitled to the 320 acres or the equivalent of $15 to $20 million they sought in 1907, or their descendants are entitled to citizenship in the nations of their ancestors' birth.
So we're in the book called Researches, Philosophical and Antiquarian Concerning the Aboriginal History of America by J.H. McCullough, Jr., M.D. This is from 1829. All right? It's the book. We're going to go to page 25. And we're on page 25 again. We were talking about this region, the appearance of the Indians being of that of Negro, and we had the color of the Indians of the California mission, seen by Leperos, very nearly approaches that of the Negroes, all right, whose hair is not woolly, and in another place, the color of these Indians, which is that of Negroes. Langsdorff, who visited San Francisco on the coast of California, confirms the observations of Le Peyrose, for he says, voyage 440, the Indians there are of a very dark complexion. The Indians in Cali, West Coast are what? Very dark complexion. Very dark complexion. Approaching to what? Black. So called black. All right? They have large projecting lips and broad, flat Negro like noses. Indeed, many of their features, as well as their physiognomy and almost their color, bear a strong resemblance to the Negroes. Their hair, however, is long and straight. That is the only difference. As we cannot admit for a moment that these American blacks, so-called black power, American blacks, these these so-called American blacks were ever driven by stress of weather across the Pacific Ocean to California, unless it be proved they are the descendants of Negroes left by the Spaniards. It will follow of necessity that they have been settled in America from the earliest ages. From the earliest ages. It says in another part of America, if reliance can be placed upon the correctness of the relation a race of blacks were seen at so early a period of our history that it seems impossible to avoid the conclusion that they were aboriginal. All right, they were aboriginal. Again, what? In another part of America, if reliance can be placed upon the correctness of the relation and race of blacks was seen at so early period of our history that it seems impossible to avoid the conclusion that they were aboriginal. Peter Martyr, third decade, page 97, is describing the journey of Balboa across the Isthmus of Darien, that's down over near Panama, Costa Rica, AD 1511. He gives the following history. There is a region not above 2 days' journey from Guarecua, in which they found only blackamoors, and those exceeding fierce and cruel. The circumstance of finding them there he attempted to explain by the conjecture that they were Ethiopians who had crossed the Atlantic to rob the country, and that after having been shipwrecked, they had been compelled by the natives to take refuge in the mountains. All right, so that's not exactly what he said because we got the actual book where Balboa says that, and he says they must be. He was adding conjecture. He didn't know. He said it must be some Ethiopians that got shipwrecked here, but that wasn't proven at all. All right, but all this is pure guesswork. Look what it says, right? I wasn't kidding. That was just guesswork by Balboa, which we shall not attempt to disprove, for it is not more plausible than the supposition that they were aboriginal. All right, it's just as possible as them being aboriginal because they. So this is the cover of the book, Estudios Arqueológicos y Etnográficos. So let's get right into it. All right, so I went to right to page 23, chapter 5, and it says here, Los Negroides en America, or the Negroes in America. All right, so this is the part that I'm going to translate. So take a look at it. So what I did is I copy pasted this and brought it to Google Translate. All right, let's take a look. So it translates to, says, several isolated but concordant facts allow us to suppose that before the formation and development of the three great ethnographic groups of which we have just spoken, the Pampas, Andeans, and Caribs, a large part of America was occupied by an inferior race of Negroid type. Okay,
the conquerors found scattered throughout the New World small tribes that from the first moment were, and continuing, this is what I'm going to translate now, continuing. So again, remember we ended up with were, so again it continues, were considered as belonging to the black race. Such were, for example, the Otomi from Mexico, the snails from Haiti, the Argajos from Cutara, the Arabos from Orinoco, the Porcejis and the Malayas from Brazil, the Manatus, Quito, the Chuanas, the Darien, etc. And just to finish up, this is the next part that I'm going to translate right here, so you can take a look at it before I take it to Google Translate. And it says, the skeletons of structure that are very different from those of the American red race, which in several parts of the continent have been found from Bolivia to Mexico, must be referred to this race. They're talking about the Negroid skeletons they found. Worthy of attention in this regard are the two skulls of exaggerated prognatism with a lowered forehead, very developed apophyses, and strong superciliary arches that in the Sumapaz Mountains found the illustrated Professor Dr. Juan de Dios Carrasquilla. So they're referring to another type of skulls, right? Negroid skulls being found in Sumapaz, that is Bogota, Colombia. So more correlation, right, of skeletons of Negro type or Australian type, right? Copper colored, so-called Negro.
All right, now we're in this book. It's called The American Indian, Unish Inaba. The whole subject complete in one volume, illustrated with numerous appropriate engravings by Elijah M. Haynes, and this is what they show. And it says that this is written in 1888 by the Masing Nagang Company. All right. So what I wanted to show is in this part of the book, and we start reading here. It says a general description of the Indian tells us that the aboriginal of America, again, the aboriginal, not a Native American, the aboriginal of America is tall, straight of stature, and muscular, having coarse black hair, coarse, well-formed limbs, deep chest, brown or copper-colored complexion, again, brown or copper-colored complexion, head a little flat, prominent nose, compressed lips, dark eyes, and possessed of great power of endurance. In regard to the complexion of the American Indian, Father Charlie Bull says, the color of the savages does not prove a third species between the white and the black, as some people have imagined. They are very swarthy. Swarthy, that means dark-skinned or so-called black, and of a dirty, dark red, a dirty, dark red, ruddy, dark red, copper colored, which appears more in Florida, of which Louisiana is a part. You see? So Florida was most of the southeast. I've told you this many times. I showed you the maps. Florida was basically the southeast of the United States, not just the state of Florida like we think today. It was big. All right, Louisiana was a part of Florida. All right, so even Louisiana, they were very what? The people in Louisiana were what? The native, the Indians, the aboriginals were very swarthy, dark, and a dirty, dark red. All right, but this is not their natural complexion. He says, the frequent frictions they use gives them this red. It is surprising that they are not blacker, being continually exposed to the smoke in winter, to the great heats of the sun in the summer, and in all seasons to all the inclemencies of the air. All right, so I'm in this book because we're talking about the same region of the Isthmus of America, or Darien, or Panama. So I got this other book called Old Panama and Castilla del Oro by C.L.G. Anderson. All right, and in this book, we're about 40, 50 pages in. The book doesn't have numbers, just goes by chapters. But I wanted to read this part here, very important, so you can know. All right, it says, the aboriginal people of the Bahamas, right? The Lucayans, discovered by Columbus, were a tall, graceful, dark-skinned race of barbarians. All right, dark-skinned race. They call them barbarians. They call you savage. They call you devils. All right, but they're the savage ones. They're the barbarians. Barbary. Who's coming from Barbary? All right. Were tall, graceful, dark-skinned race. They were gentle and loving, quite unlike their cousins on the mainland. They were loving and gentle. Or their fierce neighbors to the south, the Caribs, who dwelt in the Lesser Antilles. They possessed pottery and stone implements like celts, arrowheads, mortars, and pestles, and were experts in the use of their canoes. Columbus well described them. All of them go as naked as they came into the world. Their forms are graceful, their features good, their hair as coarse, right, as coarse as a horse tail, cut short in front and worn long upon their shoulders. They are dark of complexion. They are dark of complexion. They are dark of complexion like the Canary Islanders, right? So they're quoting Columbus journals, right? Because this is the chapter talking about his first voyage.